Hello and happy Halloween! It's me, Advent Nebula, and I'm joined with
Cruellica Kain. Hello, everyone!
So, as we were promising last time, we're going to be going into the fear of death and why we enjoy horror, or as what this podcast is probably going to be titled, Horror and Nihilism and What Makes It So Entertaining.
I don't think Kaiju is going to write that entire title, but I'd like to see him do it.
Yeah.
So, fear of death is called thanatophobia, and basically it's when anyone is fearing the idea of death or the dying process. And obviously in horror, basically you were watching significant amounts of people living that dying process.
Yes, and there are so many examples of the genre you could use, but first one I'm going to bring up is a movie I watched not too long ago, probably want to say about 2.5 months ago, with the dimension of death with Event Horizon, which really is probably the best place to start with this on the topic.
No, I think that's a fair point. So when you're looking at the fear of death, most people are considering the fear of what they don't know, because obviously you only can die once, even though those people who say they're brought back to life, and nobody knows what the afterlife is like, or for anyone who is not religious, if there is an afterlife. So everybody has their own special feelings and their own thoughts about it, and I view horror as an element of escapism. As one of our friends mentioned, which I think as well, it's a great way to kind of be the god over everyone, because you have control.
Yeah, and whether you're playing a horror game or watching a horror movie, you're just there to enjoy the ride, because you're not the one having to go through this. And when you're watching these movies or playing these games, in a way, you are the god of what you're in control of. So it gives you that sense of control that you wouldn't have if you're one of the people in the situation.
Well, I'm thinking about Event Horizon. How the story goes through is you're having to deal with life and death, good and evil, and
the answer that, yes, there is an afterlife, but it's going to suck for everybody.
Exactly. What comes afterwards. And Sam Neill does such a great job with that too, because he is really your poster child, so to speak, for how you get to experience the entire process. Because without him being your guide, you get to see, obviously, the horrific way people go through this process, but what comes afterwards. You can even look at The Exorcist as another element. When you come into the fear of death, The Exorcist is a perfect example of a mother really trying to figure out how to save her daughter, who is quickly declining from something that she cannot control. And as she's an atheist, so to speak, or agnostic at least, she does not have that religious connotation, so she has to try to figure out how to make everything make sense. And it's a perfect example of fearing death, because you are literally watching your child die as she's being possessed.
And you have no control over it, and you're having to call somebody into your house you don't exactly trust as well to try and cure the plague that has affected your daughter with Satan.
And why people really appreciate these things, not just us, but so many people do, is because you also don't feel alone. When you're watching these movies and you're watching someone try to survive, like A Quiet Place.
Yes.
You have everyone trying to survive because one wrong move,
you're dead. You have no control over anything that happens the moment you make that sound. It's fight or flight, and that's it.
And that's what human beings do on a daily basis. We are just like all of the other animals in existence. We have their fight or flight, but unlike animals, we have at least an extreme version of consciousness that makes us aware that if we fail, we're done.
Yeah. And I think Lovecraft, and any kind of Lovecraft story actually touches on that too, with the eldritch gods being what they are, tapping into our consciousness and our fears.
Now, how nihilism works with this is actually the fear of death and nihilism work so well hand in hand. Because the fear of death, as one individual will look at it, is the fear of nothingness, or the fear of not knowing what's going to happen next. Nihilism is the extreme skepticism of life, that they don't believe that there is a next step because they haven't had it proven to themselves. So it is always fascinating, because when anybody talks about the fear of death, you'll have a nihilist who will bring up their comment of, well, it just ends. And you get that fear because somebody is going to be so entirely scared of, what does that mean it ends? Is it like I just become part of the ground again and nothing else? Or it ends because of, like, the rapture, as you saw in that one Nicolas Cage movie that was a horrific nightmare.
Yeah. Now, there was an essay that was written a few years ago called Horror and Nihilism, and there was one quote in here that I want to bring up that talks about Lovecraft, but that is not how Lovecraft's tales proceed when talking about how villains and humans are good and evil. There is nothing good or evil. It's all unintelligible in Lovecraft's world, because the idea of a good and evil is incomprehensible to the power of the gods of Lovecraft's creation with the Necronomicon.
Which I think is very fair when you look at horror in general, because there is no, like, definitive hero and villain. Yes, you have your basically you have your victims and you have your killer. Be it a physical manifestation of a person or a spiritual manifestation of a demon or a ghost or anything like that.
Like what you have with Evil Dead.
Exactly. Evil Dead is a great example, because the one fear of death that we haven't talked about, which comes up in there, is the fear of, what did I unleash? Because that demonstrates in Evil Dead and so many other movies, when you read a book or open a random door or something like that, you are showing that there is something past life and death. And
there's something worse, and that's being stuck on a mortal plane.
Exactly. And it different from Event Horizon, because you see the demons in a very horrific portion, is with the Evil Dead, you don't know who to trust, you don't know where it is, but at the same time you know there's a good side to the bad side. Like, yes, there's a hell and then there's a heaven.
But you don't know what happens to the soul when the body's taken over.
Exactly, which is always the challenge, because then it's a fight for your soul, not just a fight for your perceived existence. And I know I personally am one of those individuals that fears death, because I don't know what comes after, and I have such a active imagination. I can look at a window being partially open, I can see all the tragic things that can happen through it. And so I look at horror as an element of escapism, because it is taking me out of thinking about my own death, because I'm actually having to experience it for other individuals.
Where me, being more of a nihilistic one, is like, when it happens, I'll find out then. I don't care.
And admittedly, I am married to an individual that's exactly like that. So it is very challenging sometimes. But I think the benefit of knowing your fears and kind of standing up to them is so important. Obviously, this fear is so much different than a fear of clowns or a fear of spiders, where you can actively avoid them. There's only two things guaranteed in life that I've been hearing since my grandfather started telling me as a kid: death and taxes. And obviously you can avoid taxes if you just don't pay them, but you can't avoid death.
Yeah, it's just a part of the natural cycle of being alive.
But as I have said for the last 20 years, if I find that random vampire that does not sparkle now, I will take them up on their offer. If that means I have to suck a little blood for all eternity, I'm down for it.
Hey, you don't want to get kidnapped by the changeling?
No. That doesn't sound as fun.
Oh, come on. The Fae will either end up turning you into something you want or not, or you'll end up just being food. It's a 50-50 chance.
I know, but at least if I make a bargain with a vampire or even a werewolf, hell, a werewolf wouldn't be bad. I just get hairy once a month.
Touché.
So the benefit of anything, and I think this helps talking about, is because you have to have fun with it. And you only get one life, and sometimes it sucks, sometimes it's great. Obviously, it's a roll of a dice. But horror is the perfect element of taking you to the next step, taking you to the next extreme, and looking at what you can do. And be it if you have a fear, or if you're just nihilistic, or if you're both.
Yeah.
I have met so many religious people who are nihilistic, which doesn't make sense to me, but it does exist. And you gotta enjoy what you can. And I've said it so many times, I'm a broken woman. I cannot watch rom-coms, so horror is my way of going.
Yeah. And the one topic and the one genre that we haven't touched on yet, George A. Romero's greatest creation to horror, the zombies.
And that is another facing of death that is so pivotal to everything, because it really does demonstrate, unless you watch some of the horror comedies relating to zombies,
Shaun of the Dead, but that's still a great fun,
is that when you die and you're reanimated, that you don't exist as who you were. That you become
something otherworldly.
Well, the zombie movie in Zombie High for Disney, oh god. That, where zombies could date non-zombies, that was weird. But yeah, Shaun of the Dead was a great example of having fun with it. But zombies, honestly, those are my favorite horror movies, out second to Supernatural.
Yeah, and I'm one of those that prefer the older zombie take as opposed to the viral zombie take that we've had since 28 Days Later.
Yeah, I do not like those because they kind of take that fear out of the element.
Yeah,
like,
the only one that I think has done it right is The Last of Us, with having it be a fungal infection that just takes over your brain, where you still have consciousness, but the fungus controls your body.
Well, in so for anyone who doesn't know, zombieism actually did not start as the living dead getting up and eating brains or eating people. It actually started in kind of like that Louisiana area.
It's Jamaican. Jamaica's where the original zombie mythos comes out of.
And then so when a lot of the Jamaicans moved to the United States, especially in the French Quarter,
Creole culture is where it really started to take off.
And basically those zombies were actually positive. So those zombies actually helped with healing or with trying to change behaviors and things like that. And I'm giving you a very dumbed down description. But it wasn't until you got to like White Zombie, which came in the, I think, late 50s, early 60s.
Which then turned into Night of the Living Dead with the next evolution.
And so our zombies are so much different than what it was before. And our current zombie culture is really that voracious eater who is reanimated and takes the life of another to continue living. To the point where we get to The Walking Dead, which has dramatized it.
Yeah, and then the spin-offs like the video game series The Last of Us, which is not only the horror of the fungal infected humans, but also the horror of what humans can do to each other in such an environment.
Well, and you also have the element of zombies when you have stories like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Which is one story that sadly wouldn't work nowadays, but it's still an excellent story.
It is an excellent story, and I don't think insect could do it, but I think technology.
With you just changing it with a brain, kind of like a cyberpunk element
Exactly.
to it.
And so those are the types of things that really come in with the element of death, is that lack of control you have over your own life because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you'd become a zombie. You don't know if you'd become something else where you lose your identity.
Yeah, the songs we don't bring up Lawnmower Man.
We are not going there. I like Lawnmower Man, thank you very much. But it's always scary because you can even take the elements of horror in Phantasm, where you have absolutely no control because somebody is using a demonic device. Or you can even go with the babysitter or babysitter killer queen, where they're doing that satanic ritual and you have no element of participation.
Yeah. Probably the best horror comedy to come out on Netflix the last few years.
I absolutely agree. So, at the end of it all, if you fear death, it is not a bad thing. And if anybody mocks you for it, you can kick them in the shin. Well, don't actually do it just because Cruellica told you to, because then I might get arrested for doing so and inciting violence. But don't take offense to anybody saying it. And if you're a nihilist, just be prepared that your friends are probably going to laugh at you because of the ridiculousness of nihilism.
Mind if I chime in?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say that, hi, my name is Ron. I'm just sitting in for this one, but I was also going to say that maybe if you guys have seen the movie Martyrs, I think that is a very good definition of like the fear of death and like what's in the afterlife. So that's a French extreme film that came out, and basically the whole premise of the movie is these people who basically kidnap other people and do experiments on them to the point where they're about to die, just to understand what it's like to die and like what do you see right before you're about to die. And that's the whole premise basically behind it, is like they want to know what's after this life. So I don't know if you guys have seen that movie or not, but
I've seen the American, I think there's an American
There's an
remake.
American remake, which I've seen. I haven't seen the original French.
No, I'll have to see that one. But that even goes on to the element, oh God, what was the movie? They just remade it. The original had Kiefer Sutherland, and then the newer one had Elliot Page, or Ellen Page at the time. It was about the firefighters in the original.
I can't remember.
But
then,
basically, they kind of did something similar where they would use an experiment and they would try to see what was on the other side, to the point where they're pulling in the other side to them.
And then, as we talked in one of our podcasts a few weeks ago when we were talking about Cronenberg, go in with the Dead Zone. Classic walk-in there as well, bringing in the afterlife and being able to talk to the dead.
Oh, Flatliners it was called, where you basically get yourself to the point of death. And Backdraft was the other one I was thinking of, but that's not horror. But and going on what you said, Ron, another thing is the Frankenstein effect of bringing the dead back to life. Because...
And then you have the idea, who's the real monster? What was created, or was it humanity?
And this goes along the line of especially nihilism, because you are then breaking the rules of what has been set out by either society or the religious hierarchy, which is typically what nihilists tend to defy, because they don't believe that A equals C.
Yeah, basically what it is. And Mary Shelley is a great example on that when she wrote Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to know that the love of horror, even if it's doing something that kind of goes in line with your fears, is not a bad thing as long as you use it in a healthy manner and you know it's not real. Because there are times where I have to think of the ABCs of Death or Final Destination as, okay, these are not going to happen, even though I refuse to drive behind a semi with lumber or anybody having long poles sticking out of their cars.
Or VHS. Not every house you're going to go into is going to have a satanic cult in it.
Or school. Because there was one with a school. So it's just having fun with it. And I love horror. I won't stop watching horror. I'll just stop watching certain horror, like, I don't know, Human Centipede, but that's just me.
Yeah. That's the one line of exploitation horror I don't go. And I enjoy exploitation horror, as you all know.
So with that said, thank you for joining us for this new episode. It's so fun to have somebody else joining us as well.
Especially to chime in. And with that, we conclude Halloween month. And now there is a topic going in with our next month that we really, really need to touch on. And it's something that, well, us being older.
We're old,
yeah.
Yes.
The younger generation just doesn't seem to get, but we just got to come with the fact of it. Physical media is becoming the collector's market only. So we will see you next time when we talk about physical media and as it's becoming a collector's item as opposed to the streaming market.
Basically, you can call it physical versus digital. But with that said, bye!